Good morning everyone and welcome to the latest edition of On The Whistle, where we're going to have a chat about Sunderland 2, Cardiff City 1. Another win for Sunderland, another really important 3 points, albeit they made slightly hard work of it at times. As ever, we're going to have a chat through the game and then take all your comments and questions and have a good chat through them afterwards. Won't talk about the game too long. As ever, you can see our instant reaction video from the press box if you just scroll down through the channel. But I thought by and large, I did think, on balance, having had a little bit of time to reflect on it, I do think it was a deserved win for Sunderland. I think if you look at the stats from the game, if you look at the chances they created, the XG they produced over the course of the 90 minutes, that would tell you they were pretty good value for the win. However, obviously that doesn't quite tell the full sort of story of the game. I thought the first 20 minutes was excellent. I think it was very much like the Sunderland that in our mind, when we think about this team, what they're capable of producing, what we want to see from them. It was exactly that, really, really aggressive in their sort of man-for-man marking, being quite brave in the interceptions they were trying to make, moving the ball really, really quickly, getting it out to the wingers nice and early so they could sort of cause havoc in those 1v1 duels. I thought Romain Mundle, especially early on, looked really, really sharp. And it was a bit of a joy to watch. And then, obviously, as the half developed, I think Cardiff adapted a little bit. I think after the first goal, where they were maybe a little bit naive and sort of playing out from the back and getting caught by Sunderland, as we know they can do, especially at home, they probably adapted a little bit. They probably were a little bit more direct in certain areas of the pitch, and that allowed them to then get some build-up play and create some set pieces and a little bit of pressure higher up the pitch. So I think there was an element of Cardiff adapting a little bit, but clearly sort of the sloppiness that we sometimes see from Sunderland, that lack of clinical edge, if you like, really came back to bite us. And then at the start of the second half, I thought Cardiff were probably in the ascendancy. It was really nice, really positive to see Regis Lebris try and be really aggressive in making a couple of changes to turn that round. It took a little bit of a while, I think, for those changes to make an effect. I don't think it instantly changed the game. And obviously Cardiff could have gone ahead. A really, really good save from Anthony Patterson after his early mistake in spilling the cross to push that effort from Yusuf Salis onto the post. And then it was very open game for a while. I thought I couldn't really pick a winner. I could definitely see Cardiff scoring. I could also see Sunderland scoring on the break because they were causing a lot of problems. Mundle bursting forward, meandering Isidor's pace. And then it felt as if Cardiff went a little bit more defensive after some of their substitutions. Looked like they were happy to absorb a little bit of pressure, really changed the flow of the game. Gave Sunderland a lot of more possession, a lot more territory, albeit without creating many chances. And then from Cardiff's perspective, a really poor goal to concede. Switching off at a free kick. Nice way from Trey Hume, really clever. Everyone was expecting him to whip that cross into the back post instead of a little pass for Isidore, whose ball across was then converted by Chris Mepham. And I did think, again, although in the very last moments of stoppage time, Sunderland probably lost the ball once or twice where they shouldn't have, I thought Sunderland managed it pretty well after that. They kept the ball, and they made it really difficult for Cardiff to apply pressure on the ball. Whether it was a sort of a lack of confidence after the goal or fatigue, Cardiff, I thought, struggled to get up the pitch and really apply pressure. And I thought Sunderland managed it quite well. So it was definitely a few sort of concerns in the performance, but I think there were quite a few positives as well, as we spoke about on the instant reaction video. I thought that although both of them tired, which you would expect because they've been out for so long, I thought in the first sort of 40-45 minutes, I think we saw Romain Mundle, Alan Brown, how effective they can be. We know that with Mundle because he's played so many starts, made so many brilliant contributions this season, but I thought he looked pretty much back to his best. Alan Brown, I thought, was really effective, looked really energetic, made some good runs, got about the pitch well, kept it nice and simple in possession, which you want. I thought there was a lot of positives from there. And obviously, we have to talk about Eliza Mienda. Even if we take away the goal, which was a really important, really nice to take and finish, just the way he held the ball up, the sort of swagger that he's playing with at the moment, it's just a joy to watch. And obviously his pace and his dribbling ability just causes the opposition so many problems. We're talking about a situation now where it feels like Sunderland have two kind of real top championship strikers at their disposal, and that's an absolutely fantastic place to be. And I know that a lot of people calling for 4-4-2 from the start, which I can understand, but I think we saw again how effective it can be to unbalance the opposition, to be able to switch to that in the game and bring on some fresh legs, whether it be Isidore or Mienda, and how difficult that is for the opposition to deal with. So definitely some room for improvement. I don't think there's any doubt about that, and we'll go into that with some of your questions. But lots of positives as well. And ultimately, we're at the stage of the season where it's about getting the job done. And I do think overall, although they could certainly have been a lot more ruthless, I do think Sunderland deserved the win. So let's get into some of your questions and comments. I'm going to start with this one from Darren over, who left this comment underneath on our instant reaction video. Darren says, was Samed injured, or have we just seen the end of him, do you think? Yeah, so I asked Salis Abdul. Samed was obviously a surprise absentee from the squad. I asked Reduce the Briefs about this in his press conference afterwards, and he said that Samed has picked up a calf injury. It's not a season-ending one. I think by the sounds of it, it'll be about 3 or 4 weeks. So Sunderland are hopeful that he might be able to come back after the international break, which is obviously the same kind of time scale as Enzo Lefebvre at the moment. So it's not a major injury, but I think the problem is obviously the challenge for Samed is that, you know, if he comes back after the international break, he then again has to try and rebuild his sharpness. He then has to again rebuild his match minutes, and with the way the players in the team are performing at the moment, that's obviously going to be quite difficult for him. So although it's not the biggest injury in the world, it is obviously a fairly significant setback because time for him to sort of build his match fitness is really, really running out. So that is a real disappointment, because I think ideally, at some point Lebris, if possible, would probably like to give Dan Neil or Job a breather ahead of a potential playoff campaign, just because of the sheer number of minutes they're playing. Hopefully he will be able to do that towards the back end of the season if Samed does get back after the international break and gets to build some sharpness. But yeah, at the moment it's another kind of frustration really in what has been a really frustrating season. So that was what was going on with Samed. Now the next question, just because so many people are asking about it, which obviously I can understand. A lot of you asking around Anthony Patterson. So Hannah says, what has happened to Pato? Too many basic mistakes creeping in again. Regardless of what league we are in next season, is it time to look for a new number one? A lot of you on YouTube asking about Patterson and whether it's time to give him a break from the team and bring in Simon Moore. I have a couple of views on this. The one is that I've obviously had the chance to watch back a few times. Like, for me, it's a foul. Should we expect Anthony Patterson to deal with that cross, whether it be through still being able to catch it, punch it away, whatever it may be? Yes, I think that's fair. I think it is an error. But I think it's a foul. Like, I think that the striker knows what he's doing. I think he knows that he's not going to be able to challenge for the ball. I don't think he is challenging for the ball. I think he's just, which he's been clever, which is what we would all do in that situation. I think he's just disrupted the goalkeeper. He's moved his arm across. And it's worked for him, but like for me, I think it's a foul. I think if that's in the Premier League with VAR, I think that foul gets given every single time. For sure, I think Patterson would be frustrated. And it was interesting, I asked Lebris about this afterwards, what his view on it was, and he said that certainly in France, where he's kind of used to his coaching career, it gets given as a foul, but also that he wasn't necessarily expecting it to be given as a foul, because obviously it's a bit different, especially in England, but especially in the Championship and the lower leagues, that obviously a lot more contact is sort of allowed. And so he was pretty clear that it was something that Patterson would have to learn from, and it was something they would have to review. But at the same time, so I think there is definitely sort of an improvement there to be made from Patterson, but I do think it was a foul, and so I'm willing to cut him a little bit of a slack in a way that I probably wasn't after the whole game for that one, because I do think it was a foul. For me, like, my opinion on Patterson, and I know some people disagree, which is I completely respect. For me, my view hasn't really changed from a couple of weeks ago. I don't think it's the time yet to drop Patterson. I think that he made an outstanding save from Salis when the scores were 1-1. That was really, really important. I thought he had a good game with Sheffield Wednesday last week. He made one really, really important save again from Ingleson when it was 1-1. I think they were two really important moments. I do think, although it's happened in the last two home games, I still think broadly over a long period of time that errors are quite rare. Now, obviously, if this keeps happening where Patterson keeps making errors that lead to goals, it's going to be an unsustainable situation. I think that's fairly obvious. But I think, again, looking at his stats over the course of the season, it suggests it's quite rare. It suggests that he's a good shot stopper. He might not be right at the top this season for sort of claiming crosses and being really aggressive with that. And maybe that does speak to a little bit of a lack of confidence from where he was a couple of years ago. But for me, like, I think you've got to, at the moment, try and give him a chance to play through it. I think he deserves that. And as I say, I think he was a little bit unlucky yesterday, even if, yeah, fair enough, we can all see he does have to do better. So I know it's not an opinion that everyone will agree with, but for me, I don't think we're at that point yet. I think clearly if it keeps happening where errors lead to goals, then that is going to become an unsustainable situation. But I think that it's really important for Sunderland heading into a potential playoff campaign to just try and let him rebuild that confidence in the team. And I think, you know, the saves that he's making at the moment are still very, very good. And I think that should, in my opinion, sort of give him some credit. So for me, it's not time yet to look at Patterson. Even though I agree with viewers who are saying that, you know, Simon Moore was solid when he was in the team earlier this season and deserves a chance. I can see that logic, but at this stage I'm sticking with Patterson. So the next question is from Andy, who says, we've got 7 wins, 3 draws, 2 defeats in 2025, yet there's still a general feeling we're not clicking and dropping daft points. Is it a case of glass half empty? Are we expecting too much of a young and relatively small squad? I think there's a little bit both, Andy. I think you've made a really good point, actually, in that it hasn't always felt like it recently, but Sunderland's record this year is really, really good. And they deserve a hell of a lot of credit for that, as you say, with such an inexperienced group, and given how many injuries we've had during that time. I think it's probably, Andy, the manner of the way that the points have been dropped in terms of against teams at home where, who've been struggling either for form or struggling at the foot of the table, where really, I think it would be fair to expect Sunderland to win those games. And I know internally they would definitely have expected to win those games. The manner of the way some of the points have been dropped, thinking about the Leeds game, which, there was no disgrace in losing to Leeds, but being 1-0 up and then conceding in stoppage time. So I think a lot of it is more the manner probably of the points dropped than the actual results themselves, really, that have left a little bit of frustration. And I think obviously there's probably still a little bit of a hangover from those games against Watford, Plymouth and Hull, when Sunderland was still right in the top 2 race, and they felt like there was a real opportunity there, and it just felt like Sunderland just weren't quite up to get up to the level they needed in that moment. So I think it's probably it's not so much the form, maybe, Andy, maybe it's more of a case of just the sense of missed opportunities. But I agree with you. I think it's really fair to zoom out and say that actually Sunderland's form over a long period has been pretty good, and that is quite impressive given some of the absentees that has been in that time. So I thought that was a really good point, Andy. Thanks for sending that in. Dave says, are we ever going to have the courage to really push on at home when we've taken the lead? Playing against an ordinary side and 1-0 up, aren't we obliged to take some chances and seek to entertain? Not for the first time, we've passively sat off, sought to take the life out of the game, and only managed to draw poor opposition onto us. So I think this is like a fairly common, I want to talk about, because I think this is something a lot of fans kind of feel frustrated by. And I can understand that. It's a weird one yesterday because I don't think Sunderland sat off after they scored the goal. I actually felt for the 10-15 minutes afterwards, I was really encouraged because I felt like Sunderland were really trying to put their foot down and really put the game to bed. I thought they were being really aggressive in their defensive position, and sometimes to their detriment, because sometimes they were trying to make quite brave interceptions and tackles and actually opening up the counter to Cardiff City. So I do think initially there was a real aggression about their play, and it looked to me like maybe they'd learned some lessons and they understood that they wanted to really put the game to bed, and they weren't quite able to do that. So I don't think it was necessarily a case of them sitting off yesterday. I think that they just lost momentum. And I think you have to give credit as well. Like, we have to remember as well that, you look at some of the, Cardiff have got some good championship quality. They've spent money over the last 2 windows. So when we talk about these teams, we have to give them a little bit of respect as well, that they also understood what was happening in the opening stages of the game and they adapted to it. And they have got players who can cause problems. Ruben Colwell, for example, is a really gifted player. So I think we have to sometimes, we have to show a little bit of respect to the opposition as well in terms of how they adapt in games and how they adapt to Sunderland's threat. I don't think Sunderland necessarily sat off yesterday, but what I do agree is that, certainly what Sunderland lack, if there's one thing really that this team lacks, it's a little bit of a clinical edge, a really ruthless edge. And it's interesting here because Chris has asked this, which I think is really interesting. Heard you say it on the instant reaction video, but we are not clinical at all, and yet we're the 4th highest scorers in the league, which is interesting, isn't it? Because Sunderland do score a lot of goals, but one of the things we spoke about after the Luton game was how rarely Sunderland win by more than 1 goal. The vast majority of their games are settled by 1 goal, and I think that just speaks to the fact that this is a very, very good Sunderland side, very spirited side, lots of character, but they're probably not ruthless or clinical enough. If I'm thinking back yesterday, Alan Brown, who I praised earlier, had a really good game. Obviously misses that big chance from the corner where the ball runs to him. It's just those little moments where Sunderland can put the game to bed. They don't do so, and I think that invites the opposition back into it, and it gives the opposition the space and the time to make the tactical adjustments they need to get back into the game. So yeah, I think that it is a real frustration that it does feel like Sunderland are inviting teams back into the game after they take the lead at home. I have to say yesterday, I don't think it was initially a deliberate thing. I think they tried to do it. They just couldn't get that goal. On that note, another couple of questions on a similar theme. Tom Shine says, another hard watch, but I believe the injury to Roberts disrupted both momentum and style of play for us. Everyone quotes goals and assists, but there's a lot more to Roberts' role in the side, and just as this is today proved, and if injured, I believe his loss will be pivotal going forward. Ian says, we started fast, scored and seemed to be pushing on until Roberts' injury. Do you think Roberts' injury disrupted our momentum? And do you think that with Rigg coming on, the balance of the team was maybe off with Rigg not being a winner? To be honest, I think these factored into Cardiff getting a foothold. Yeah, so I agree with that. I think that Roberts started the game really, really positively. I thought he was at the heart of a lot of the good stuff that Sunderland were doing. I do think that the injury had 2 impacts. I think it hurt Sunderland because Roberts was playing so well, and I think it gave Cardiff a chance to breathe and to get some messages onto the pitch and to make the adjustments they needed. So I think that was a really, really important moment in the first half. Chris Rigg isn't a right winger. We know he's more effective in the middle of the pitch. I have to say that I thought he had a really good second half. I thought he got into the game. His footwork was good, helped create some chances, got into good areas, but it did take him a little bit of a while. I completely agree in terms of, listen, ideally, Roberts, we would all like to score more goals. I think in his position and the amount of minutes he plays, increasing his goal output's kind of the last hurdle for Roberts, but I still completely agree with that first comment that his role in the side is really important. I think you saw that in the first 20 minutes when Roberts plays well, Sunderland play well. So I do think that was an important part if we're talking about, and I've kind of criticising Sunderland there for not being clinical and ruthless enough. I do think that injury disrupted them at a bad time. The news on Roberts is hopefully fairly positive. We spoke to Lebris after the game, and Lebris said that there was a muscle injury, but it was more of a precaution. Roberts is obviously a really experienced player now. He knows his body. He just felt a tightness, and the coaching staff basically just took the decision that there was no need to take any risk, that it made no sense to take any risks. And so they just made the sub there and then. So while obviously it feels quite unlikely that we'll see Roberts on Tuesday night, I think that hopefully they've managed to catch it before it becomes more serious. I think they have to be really careful with Roberts now because of Pervader's injury. They can't afford to lose him for a long period. So hopefully sort of getting that issue identified early will help them. So let's see how that goes. But hopefully Roberts hasn't got a serious injury. A couple of you asking what I think Lebris will do if he is injured. I think Rigg will start on Tuesday night if Roberts is out, but as a few of you mentioned, there is definitely the option to play Meander on the right. Clearly he's not comfortable on the left. I don't think it suits his game, but I think on the right he can have an impact, so that's definitely an option as well, whether it's from the start or on the bench. So yeah, let's have a look, see what questions we have got. There was one more on YouTube. Oz Mackham says, excuse for the lopsided tash this week. Yeah, listen, fair enough. I said I would get rid of the tash. Just laziness, haven't got round to it yet. Probably got quite fond of it after a little bit of time. But yeah, fair play for calling me out on it. I will promise that the tash will be gone by the time the post Preston on the whistle is done. So there is my pledge to you, Oz Mackham. Apologies, everyone, for the lopsided tash this week. So Oscar says, what's the deal with Sirkin? Is Lebris resting him to get some minutes for Yelder in case of future injuries? Is it not wanting to change a winning starting 11, or is it because Sirkin has looked a bit tired lately? I think Yelder has done very well since he's come in based on his lack of minutes throughout the season, but surely Sirkin on his day is one of, if not the best fullback in the league. To be honest, Oscar, I think all your points are really good. I think that it's threefold. I don't think Sirkin has played as well since his wrist injury as he played at the very start of the season. Still been pretty consistent, still performed at a good level, I think, but I don't think he's been quite at the level we saw in the opening weeks of the season. So I think Lebris has wanted to rest him. I think he wants to get minutes into Yelder for exactly the reason you mentioned, that because of Adjilise's injury, because of Dan Ballard's current injury, Sunderland do not have any cover if Dennis Sirkin gets injured. He's their only kind of natural left back. So I think that Lebris is trying to get minutes into Yelder so that if, and touch wood, it doesn't happen, Dennis Sirkin did pick up an injury or an absence for a period of time, that Yelder is ready, that he's match fit, that he's confident and he can come in and have an impact. I think that's what we're seeing here. I think the other aspect of it is that Lebris has wanted to reward Yelder. It's something I've talked about a few times on the On the Whistle videos this season. Lebris really, really rates Yelder. He loves his attitude in training. He loves how he's applied himself and the work he's put in, even when he's been frustrated and not in the team. And I think there's an element of wanting to reward him for that as well, and to make sure he feels really, really connected and part of this sort of promotion push. So I think there's kind of three reasons. I think primarily they've just thought it's the best time to give Sirkin a bit of a breather, and hopefully he can get back up to his absolute kind of sharpest and most dynamic going into the end of the season. But yeah, for sure, I think that we will see Sirkin come back in at some point. I think it's just more a case of making sure Yelder's ready which is a distinct possibility at the moment with Ballard injured, he might be needed. And then we've got one question here from SFC Forever over on YouTube. It says, in RLB's press conference, he made a point that there are many reasons why Pervader has been unavailable. Aside from injury, do you know what other reasons he is referring to? Not fully, but the very obvious one is that there was a game, you might remember, I think it was the Luton game in midweek, where Pervader was meant to be on the bench. He would have definitely got minutes off the bench. He would have been heavily involved in that game. And obviously he was late to a team sort of gathering. And that was the reason why he missed that game. So that's one kind of example. I think Lebris is just making the general point that mainly it's been fitness issues, but he just hasn't been in a position to sort of capitalise on the opportunities that have been there. And I think it's a frustration because someone need him. You know, you see yesterday how dangerous it sort of is with Roberts at the moment in terms of the amount of minutes he's played. And I think there's just a frustration that Pervader hasn't been available more to sort of take off some of that load, because he's a player that Sunderland really, really need. And obviously now he's going to be away for a period of time. So yeah, that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for all your questions and comments. I will be back without the lopsided tash after the Preston game. There'll be a podcast on this channel, I'm guessing tomorrow, and we'll talk about some of this in a bit more detail as well. But thanks very much for your questions and comments, and as ever, thanks so much for watching.